My name is Jamie Lackey, and I'm going to be reading my story, What Waits Out There. Buzzing alarms greeted 238R when she jolted out of cold sleep. The world around her was fuzzy, and her fingers felt stiff and strange. She pulled herself out of her pod and stabilized herself against zero-G drift with her tail. The lights pulsed, and the alarm buzzed. It was just like the drills she'd done over and over again before she left. She propelled herself over to the control panels. Everything checked out. Engines, life support, fuel. She glanced out the tiny viewport and froze. The distant, scattered stars weren't moving. They should have been. She'd broken the light barrier before she entered cold sleep. She floated forward and looked out the port there. There were no stars in front of her. Had she crashed into something? How was that possible? There was no sign of impact, and she was in deep space, light years from anything that could have been an obstacle. She fired the starboard thrusters, then the port. The rear of the ship swung back and forth, but the front stayed anchored. She tried full reverse. Nothing happened. She ran through all of the drills she practiced. She'd trained for 1,000 situations. This wasn't one of them. She wished that her mission had been a duo instead of a solo. She'd already wished that 1,000 times. She imagined she heard someone else breathing, felt a hand squeeze hers. She shuddered and pushed the feeling away. She couldn't afford to let her imagination run away with her. She sent a report back to Earth, but it would take over a month to get to them, and another month for her to receive a response. She stared out into the vacant darkness. The darkness stared back. 2 years earlier, 238R floated next to her berth and stared at her orders on her infopad. She blinked, and they didn't change. She felt numb. 238S burst into their room, waving her own infopad like a flag, her identical face twisted with rage. The engineers who designed the 238 class had given them long, narrow faces, prehensile feet on stunted legs, and smooth, hairless brown skin. "I can't believe it!" S shouted. "Believe what?" R asked. S wrapped her tail around a hook in the wall and shoved her orders into R's face. "After all that talk about how they didn't look down on clones having relationships, they still assigned us to different ships. Look, you're not on my crew roster. I'm going to fly straight down to the main office." R pulled the infopad out of S's hand and replaced it with her own. "They didn't separate us as punishment." S looked down at R's orders. "Oh." Her eyes widened. "You got the deep space solo." She pulled R close and kissed her. "Of course you did. Who else would they pick? I'm so proud of you. You're going to explore the galaxy." S kissed her again, then pulled away. Tears formed at the corners of her eyes. "But that means I'm never going to see you again." Her tears floated away and caught the fluorescent light. They shone like stars. R pulled on her pressure suit. Maybe, if she could see the problem from another angle, a solution might present itself. She wasn't ready to waste any of her probes yet, and she couldn't think of anything else to do. The enforced idleness was driving her crazy. She saw movement out of the corners of her eyes, heard faint whispers beneath the thrum of the engines. She hoped it was just her imagination. She'd never had problems controlling her imagination before. She cycled through the airlock, then pushed away from the ship, keeping a careful eye on her tether. She drifted slowly away, out into the void of space. Dim, distant stars glittered all around, except directly in front of the ship. The nose of the ship vanished into blackness, like it had been sheared off. It was almost as if the ship had snagged on some imperfection in space, and the energy of the ship's forward momentum ripped a hole in the universe. And if it took the energy of a ship moving at relativistic speeds to get into this mess, she would never be able to pull herself back out. She was trapped like a fly in a spider web. She saw deep, oily ripples in the darkness, but she couldn't tell if they were real or figments of her imagination. She drifted to the place where the nose vanished. Curiosity pulled at her. She reached a hand toward the invisible black, then snatched it away. She went back inside and plugged herself back into cold sleep to wait for Earth's response. S clutched her hand. "Are you nervous?" she asked. R nodded. Of course she was. "I heard that they might force you to take a name," S teased, "since you're going to be in so many headlines." R frowned. The clones were allowed to choose names if I wanted them, but R had never seen the point. A designation had always been good enough. "It's too bad you can't go downside. They could pin a medal on you and everything," S said. R had lost all interest in visiting the planet when their instructors told them that the clones' skeletal structure would collapse under Earth's gravity. S still thought the idea of visiting their species' birthplace was terribly romantic. "I'm going to miss you," R whispered. "I can't imagine what life would be like without you filling my silences." S kissed her cheek. "Maybe I can be a stowaway." R laughed. "Yeah, great idea. You've always been so good at staying quiet and out of sight." She almost wished that S had suggested that she pass on the mission, that she let someone else have the incredible honor that they'd dropped onto her shoulders. S squeezed R's hand. "I'm going to miss you." R woke up in the dark. A figure hulked over her, laid a cold hand on her cheek. "Come inside," it whispered. Its voice sounded like her own, like S's voice. "We're waiting for you." Chills crawled down R's spine. Was this a dream? She never dreamed. "What are you?" "There's only one way to find out." She blinked, and the dark form before her was gone. But the chill that had crawled down her spine retreated to her head, and she knew that she was no longer alone on this mission. "Is it true that you'll never come back?" the reporter asked. R rubbed her eyes. She was tired. The ceremony had taken hours, and there were so many interviews. The reporters all floated awkwardly, clutching the wall with white-knuckled hands and jerking back and forth with overcompensating, gravity-accustomed muscles. Their long legs trailed uselessly, ending in tiny, club-like feet. They looked so wrong to her. She wondered how she looked to them. They all asked the same questions. "It's true," R said. "My mission is one way. I heard the next generation, the 239s, can actually see radiation. Why aren't they sending one of them instead?" "I'm sure they'll send at least one when they're ready. I'm only going in one direction. That leaves a lot of space still unexplored." "Aren't you afraid?" R shrugged. "We were created for space exploration. It's an honor to be chosen to go to deep space." "That's not really an answer." R met the reporter's eyes. "Of course I'm afraid." R fired a probe into the darkness. It vanished, and her readings went black. She connected the next probe to a cable before she fired it. The instrument still went dark. The cable played out. She hit the switch to reel it back in. The ship shuddered and lurched forward. Fear spiked through her, and she hit the emergency disconnect button. The cable snaked into the blackness. She wondered why it just didn't pull her in, too.